Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining the program. My name is Frank Salatis, and as you notice, I just put up a poll. And I'm looking for some information from you about what your organization does in connection with resource planning and portfolio management, just to get an idea of. Yeah, it might even give some of the speakers a couple of other things to talk about. What I'm seeing here is on that first question, which is how efficiently does your organization manage its project and operations resources? What we have here is no one has said zero extremely efficiently, 0% extremely efficiently. Roughly, let's see, 67% said moderately efficiently, and 33% said somewhat efficiently. And that is a kind of an interesting bit of information. I think that might help the speakers and also give us an idea of where some of the challenges might be in managing our overall resources. So thank you very much for answering that question. Okay, I'm going to close that question, and actually I'm going to bring up another question. And the next question is, my organization connects strategic planning with portfolio management and resource capacity. So I'm going to ask you to quickly answer that question. And I will be introducing the speakers in just a minute. In the meantime, while you're answering that question, we have the information about the Resource Planning Summit right up here on the screen, February 10th to 13th in Nashville, Tennessee. That would be a great place to go. So, plan on attending, because not only are you going to get a great education in resource planning, portfolio management, there'll be some discussion about PMOs and organizational efficiency, but there are also some really unique evening events and some Nashville-style entertainment. It's going to be a really excellent conference. It is the premier thought leadership conference for resource management. And you can get information at www.resourceplanningsummit.com. So again, thank you very much for joining. So the question being, my organization connects strategic planning with portfolio management and resource capacity. What we have is only 22% strongly agree and 44% somewhat agree, which brings us up to 66% or kind of connecting the strategic planning and resource planning together. That means that there's some work to be done there, and I think that the speakers will find some of that information useful, especially as they continue to prepare for the upcoming conference. So we have 10% saying somewhat disagree, and certainly there's some concern there, and then 20% say resource capacity is not addressed. So I think that these are things to think about. Okay, just to kind of get an idea of what's going on in the world of project management and portfolio management. So I'm going to close that one, and I have one more question for you, and then we're going to get started with our speaker. But this is the question: is, just bring that up so everybody can see. Resource planning is a critical factor in project selection and portfolio management. So let's see what we have here. We have some agreement there. 67%, 60% strongly agree, 40% somewhat agree, and that's changing a little bit. 75. Okay, so we believe those of you that are online with us here see that connection. That resource planning is certainly a critical factor in project selection and portfolio management. I just want to share you one thing before I bring on our first speaker. And that is that myself and a colleague are often teaching a class associated with being a business savvy project manager. And we joked about this one organization that says that they maintain a list of the 25 top 10 projects. I just want you to think about that, the 25 top 10 projects. What we have to do here, and what the purpose of this question is that we need to make sure we understand just how much capacity that we have when it comes to selecting the projects, to make sure, number one, that we do have the capacity in terms of our resources to actually manage these projects, and number two, that we have the money available to do it, and I guess number three would be that it makes sense that these projects make a financial sense to the organization. So thank you for answering those questions. and appreciate your time on that. And what we're going to do now is, on behalf of PD Ware, which is the host of the Resource Planning Summit, we'll be going right into our first speaker. And our first speaker is Captain Kevin Smith, U.S. Navy retired, as an expert in the field of performance and management, performance in mission critical environments. So I am going to take a moment, and what we'll do here is that we are going to introduce the speaker by giving them the position of presenter. So I'm going to take care of that in just a second. So give me a chance to move that. Okay, and here we are. And Kevin, Captain Kevin, I am going to make you a presenter. And you can introduce yourself, and we can begin the presentation. Okay, so you're unmuted, Kevin, so welcome to the session.
All right, thank you. And I have something on my screen that, please close confidential window. All right, I think I've got my screen up. How does it look to you, Frank?
It's looking good. Optimizing performance. Okay, we're ready to roll.
Okay, all right. I'm delighted to be here and thank all of you who are participating in this webinar. I want to talk about optimizing performance, and in particular, I would like to discuss optimizing performance in mission critical environments. And that's something that sometimes we take that for granted, or sometimes we don't really address that. In my experience, that sort of like is something that is under the radar, but I'm trying to elevate that to a level of importance in terms of how we conduct our business or military operations. Again, I'm Captain Kevin Smith, U.S. Navy retired. I'm a naval aviator, former squadron commander, and I guess you would say that my career has been punctuated by a number of major problem-solving initiatives. Some of them were at the national level, and so I was brought in by the Department of Transportation to solve a big airline problem. And also I solved a number of problems for the military. So the big question here is, what do we want to do? Okay, so we obviously want to conduct business or military operations, but we also, in my view, we also want to see if we can wow the customer. What does that actually mean? All right, is this just kind of smoke and mirrors kind of thing, or is it something that is really meaningful? If the customer doesn't expect to have that level of performance, customer doesn't expect to see that solution developing in a rather remarkable way. And so I'm going to go through this in terms of how do we wow the customer. Now, I've listed 10 things, and this is my take on it. It's not the only 10. It's not the top 10, Frank. It's it's my take on what I consider to be those those wow opportunities. All right, so 10 ways to wow your clients or your customer. Number one, and these are kind of listed in the order of priority. Number one is understand where your customer operates. Very, very important. We tend to underestimate the importance of that, and that's crucial. In my business, that was the difference between success and failure. Know the environment in which your customer operates. Does your customer always operates in normal conditions, or might your customer operate in mission critical situations or encounter mission critical situations? And that's the key question. And that needs to be answered right up front, right? Even before we begin to do anything in terms of building something or whatever, is we need to come to grips with that question. Question number one. Number two, similar, which is know the event. What does that mean? Okay, so your customer may very well encounter mission critical events along the way. Now, when I say your customer, it could be your own organization. In the military, when I was a squadron commander, my customer happened to be the air wing commander. So I did things and he expected me to do certain things and solve certain problems. So I use the term customer broadly. Mission critical events will always occur. That's something that I have learned over the last 50 years. And we should take that as a given in this complex world of ours. And then, how do we deal with this reality? If we accept that, how do we deal with this reality? I would say that we want to be prepared for that which is mission critical. Okay. And we're going to be discussing that today. Also, we'll be discussing that in more detail at the summit next month. So I hope all of you will attend that summit. And how do we prepare ourselves? Or another way of saying that, how do we respond to mission critical events? And the speakers after me will be discussing this in some measure of detail. We want to make sure that we are capable, or we have adaptive responses, or we are capable of adaptive responses. I guess that's a better way of saying it. So agile and adaptive becomes something more than just window dressing. We need to have that, or those resources in place. Mission critical events. What is that? All complex mission critical events share many common characteristics. That's pretty much a given. Therefore, my proposal is to send your elite problem solvers to these trouble spots, trained in such matters. Now, we're going to be talking about that in a little bit more detail momentarily, and of course at the summit. So elite problem solvers are a kind of a new idea I'm presenting, throwing out there in the marketplace of ideas. And finally, we want to achieve mission success. The goal here, of course, for all of us is mission success. Number three, and I guess this is also a really big one, is to know the problem. So the problem discovery process is so very much in need today. We encounter many problems in our military or business operations. And know the problem. And if the problem is complex, we have to recognize that, because complex problems have their own set of solutions that are not intuitive. I'm going to propose that a problem is mission critical if it is complex and it is time compressed. In other words, it's urgent. It's urgent that we solve it, but the solution is not obvious. It is often counterintuitive. Normal versus mission critical. We can talk about that in some detail. I'm not going to get into this today. Don't really have a lot of time. I will talk a little bit more about that at the upcoming summit. But we ought to understand what we mean when we say mission critical in some level of detail. Problems that threaten mission success are, in fact, mission critical, as well as being complex and time compressed. I'm going to propose here that problems that threaten mission success are high on the risk ladder. So we have high, very high, and extreme. These are the areas in which we urgently need to solve a problem, because the risk, the mission risk or the operational risk, is unacceptable. Here, number 4, and this is also a big one in my book, which is recognize that normal is the exception, not the rule. Normal conditions are the exception rather than the rule. And there's lots of reasons for that. Could be, competition in the business environment. It could be the complexity. It could be worldwide operations. It could be the velocity of things. It could be all kinds of things. In the military, there's a whole set of issues and things that make the environment complex, make the situation complex. And it is not what you would call a normal day. The assumption here is that mission critical events are to be expected along the way, and so we should be prepared for them. Number 5, and this is to avoid the really big mistake. And in my view, and I say this not to sound superior, because I'm not. I say this because I have made this mistake over and over again. I wish I hadn't, but I have. And so I guess I've learned something along the way. And so I try to point this out. I try to comply with this and point this out as I go forward, is to avoid the really big mistake, which is the wrong assumption. And that is this: business or military problems are always a one-off event. That happens to be wrong. And we need to recognize that. And so that's sort of like defective thinking, if you will, or it's not utilizing critical thinking. So, and if we believe that, if we go along with that mistake, then we send whoever is available to the trouble spot and hope for the best. That is the wrong assumption, and that's the wrong approach. And I say that in a spirit of humility, because I have made that very mistake on a number of occasions. The big picture, military or business problems are never a one-off event. And this is what I call the proper frame of reference. To have that, we need to understand our frame of reference as we go forward and recognize it. I get into this in some level of detail next month, as well as there's an upcoming workshop in Chicago in April, 2-day workshop, which explains it more fully. I talk about things like framing and understanding the problem space and the solution space. Number 6 on our WOW event, which is clarify the event response model. All right, so an event plus your response equals an outcome. Recognize that the event is a non-variable. All right, so event is a given, or a mission critical event, in fact, is something that we need to deal with. Our response is variable, and to the extent that we can respond to that in an effective way equals a favorable outcome. So remember that and keep that in mind. And I try to remember that. Don't always do so, but in my work, I try to remember that. What is the event response model? That there is such a thing. I'm not going to be talking about that in any great detail. I know this is a rather busy slide, And don't worry about it. This is not something that you need to memorize or understand. I'm just going to point out that there is, in fact, a good event response model for mission critical events. It's not the only one. It is the one that I use, and I have used it successfully. Operational realities versus risk management. We need to understand that. Operational risk management is kind of a big deal right now in a lot of sectors. I know it's a big deal in the military after those two surface ship collisions recently by the Navy. I know operational risk management is kind of a big deal. The other event, tragic event, was the Deepwater Horizon disaster. So operational risk management becomes kind of a key in our approach to finding a solution. Deploy elite problem solvers. That's number 7. Now, that's kind of a new idea. All right. So we're not going to just send out anybody who's available. We're going to make sure that we have trained professionals when they go out and try to deal with mission critical events. So we deploy elite problem solvers to our major trouble spots. Now, you can say, well, when have you done that before, Kevin? And I would say that, well, we did that back in the early 90s when I was involved in trying to come up with a solution to the need for elite problem solvers in the airline industry. That happened to be a successful effort. It was done at the national level. I was working for an organization put together by the Department of Transportation, and I was the chairman of that organization. And we did come up with this idea, and we were able to identify how we create elite problem solvers. Elite problem solvers are, we want to deploy them. We want to deploy them to our trouble spots, either in our own organization, our customer's organization, or what have you. Now, before we deploy them, item number 8 is crucial here, because then we have to assume responsibility for their training and equipment. So we need to train and equip our elite problem solvers, or our cadre of elite problem solvers. And how do we do so? And that becomes an important question that we need to answer, all of us. I will try to provide some answers next month at the summit. But training and outfitting elite problem solvers becomes crucial. So that's item number 8. Now, you can say, well, if I send these elite problem solvers out to solve a compelling and mission critical problem that my customer has, is that going to give him some level of confidence that we are up to the task? And I would say the answer to that would be yes. I would say that ought to be part of our business model, or our military performance model, is to have those folks available. Number 9, we're going to employ, along with our elite problem solvers, we're going to employ models and algorithms. Why is that? Because of the nature of complexity. All right, complexity is a very tricky thing to deal with wherever we encounter it. So a complex problem, complex situation, complex and time compressed situation, very difficult to deal with. And we need to be equipped to deal with those challenges. Models and algorithms are the way to go, right? Not just reams of data, but models and algorithms. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that next month. The algorithm, in my view, is key. All right, now we're going to present some algorithms that have been developed that I present also in the textbook that I have published. That's available. It's in national distribution. But the algorithms are key. You can come up with your own, right? I would not necessarily borrow other people's algorithms. I might use them as an idea or as a stimulation of innovation, but you can come up with your own algorithms. And doing so, I think, is very important. So algorithms are key. Number two, bottom line is we want to achieve mission success. That's the goal. We all want to do that. And let's make sure we understand those steps to our achieving mission success. 3 new ideas that I have presented, and which we will cover more in the summit. 1, complex problem solving is a standalone discipline. That's an idea that I'm presenting, kind of a new one. Number 2, all complex problems share many common characteristics. I'm not the only one saying that, by the way. That's becoming more and more of a popular notion, and we need to consider that as we go forward. And finally, and the big one here, is normality is the exception, not the rule. So we need to be equipped, prepare ourselves and our organizations for that. Mission critical. Is this the reality in which we operate? If it is, then we need to deal with that in some meaningful way. That's the end of my presentation. Back to you, Frank. Thank you for listening.
Well, thank you very much, Captain Smith. I took a bunch of notes on your presentation, and I'm sure there will be, I have a lot of questions myself. We're going to move on to our next speaker, but just key points there. You mentioned normal is the exception. I think project managers and program managers and portfolio managers are aware of that. You said to deploy the elite problem solvers, and I think that the people that we have listening to the presentation, project managers, program managers, and portfolio managers, they are, by essence of the job, elite problem solvers, and they are always in a kind of mode of training and self-development, for the business sake. So a lot of things to discuss at the upcoming summit in Nashville, Tennessee, and we really appreciate your time. And right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go right into our next presenter, which is Mr. Mark Zachman. And Mark, I'm going to make you the presenter, and you'll see a note that comes up on your screen to say share your screen. I'm going to ask you to share your screen, do a quick introduction of yourself, and then present your topic.
Outstanding. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, and is that slide coming through?
Yes, it is.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you, Frank, and thank you, Captain Smith. That was an excellent presentation. My name is Mark Zachman. I am the portfolio coordinator for Trimble Navigation, and I work within a joint venture between Trimble and Caterpillar. And I am going to jump right into the presentation today and give you a little bit of background about where I operate, my space. So I thought it would be good to start today with this slide, which shows a quick overview of our business. In short, we do some very sophisticated controls on some complex pieces of equipment. And if you will, imagine with me for a minute what it might take to automatically control the functions of an excavator or a motor grader or a bulldozer so that it can shape a complex three-dimensional surface. Now, if that's not something you're familiar with, don't worry. I wasn't either 30 years ago, but I hope you will simply take my word for it that that's a relatively complex task. So we have, in our organization, we develop all the hardware components as well as the application software and the control algorithms to do this work. That means that the people in our organization are pretty good at understanding complex systems. They might be those elite troubleshooters that Captain Smith was talking about. We've got a group of those. So our goal, however, is where we add the most value to our customers, that is we use all that knowledge of complexity to try to make an operation or an operator's job much, much simpler. We want to allow them to become an efficient expert operator with the flip of a switch on a control system. So that's our goal. And so I've borrowed this. I hope that the Navy doesn't mind. Captain, you might have been involved in this yourself, but according to Wikipedia, the KISS principle was actually coined by the U.S. Navy, and it was coined in 1960. And I'll paraphrase it simply by saying, keep it simple. I'm pretty sure I can't actually connect Leonardo da Vinci with the next quote, but simplicity is the ultimate form of sophistication, and the relevance of that is not diminished whether it was Leonardo or not. So with that as a background, I'd like to kind of just go forward and give you some examples of what we do in portfolio management in our organization. So in the spirit of simplicity, I'll define portfolio management as the layer between project execution and enterprise management. And this makes sure that your overall business goals are met. That's the job of portfolio management. In short, we must answer the question, which states, can you show the organization is going to meet its business objectives, such as revenue, market adoption, margin, etc., given your allocation of resources to the chosen project portfolio? So in a nutshell, that's the goal of portfolio management and the whole point of the talk today, wrapped up in one single sentence. Picture your CEO of your organization saying this to you. Show me that we have a viable plan that will acknowledge our business objectives, that will accomplish our business objectives this year and also in 3 or 5 years down the road. This is the space that we work in portfolio management. So let's talk a little bit about how we do that. Here's a variation on the portfolio management model showing 3 main legs of the business strategy. The market strategy and program management leg in red here is where we gather requirements and evaluate projects. Next is the green, our financial plan, which includes some key indicators such as revenue, margin, and market adoption goals. Third in blue is the information systems feedback that provides, or where we measure our progress toward the goals through key performance metrics of the organization. So I'm going to expand that a little bit. Please don't mind the complexity of this picture. The bullet points on the right side are kind of the focus here. But if I expand this into these key components, you can see that the color scheme carries forward into this more detailed view. The vision for the business strategy is communicated from the top down. However, in this model, we build from the bottom up, starting with the customer and ending with our business performance. The bullet list on the right represents the information that we need along the way to successfully manage the business. So in the next few slides, I'll give a glimpse of how we accomplish these tasks. So the journey starts with the gathering of market requirements. The key to this slide is frequent communication between the business area managers and the customers. Again, frequent communication is required between the business area manager and the development teams to make sure that we work the most critical and the most important and the most time critical elements first, which creates a prioritized backlog that, if you're following along, and the theme of this slide is, you guessed it, frequent communication and frequent feedback, and that's required to make in-flight course corrections and updates. So this is a very complex piece that I've put in a very simple slide, but this process in and of itself is a very important piece of the portfolio management because it's getting it right up front. So was there a question? Sorry, I got a little background noise there. So, okay, we'll just keep moving. So the next step in the process after determining your requirements and your development needs is the allocation of resources. You might guess that we're going to talk a little bit about resource allocation given the theme of our summit coming up. So I'm going to give you some practical examples, and in these next graphs, I'm going to show you slides that were produced from the PDWare portfolio tool using the Pivot Data Resource Reports. Now this is gathered using the information from the teams where they collect their timesheets and collect it in the database, and then I use that to generate all these following reports. So I can't go into the details of how I do that at this point, but I'm going to show you some analysis and how we use it. So something even as simple as total head count and capacity can be a challenge in many organizations. These numbers do tend to change frequently in the real world of human resources as key members come and go, and you're constantly changing your capacity. Monitoring the ratio of permanent to temporary employees and monitoring capacity changes can be a good indicator of your overall organizational health and or stress on your organization. So in this particular view, you see a ratio that I'm looking at here between temporary resources and permanent resources and how we are growing that over time to increase our capacity. And over here at the bottom, I'm getting a view of the headwinds that we might face. And our organization is actually pretty healthy in this realm where the turnover rate is relatively low. But there are times when it does tick up and you have to keep an eye on that. In this slide, I show how we look at skill ratios. Looking at our historical data, we have a good feel for the optimal ratios between the various skills within the organization. Analysis of this data shows efficiencies and bottlenecks and informs our hiring decisions going forward. When compared to content releases or release velocity, this information can be used to gauge your overall development efficiency. So as you might imagine, when you onboard new people, they don't immediately become efficient, but over time, it should show you an increase in the output of your development process. Okay. So next slide, I show you how well our high-level team allocations shown at the top right translate into actual development work for each channel. The different colors in this graph represent different channel backlogs, and we work in this space in an agile team format. So each one of these lines represents an agile team, and we allocate them to the various backlogs. So this particular view shows a time study where this was the backward-looking allocation, and we do this also in a forward-looking format to plan the future work. But what I'm trying to do here is study whether or not we're actually following what we said we were going to do. And in the detailed actual graphs that we produced out of the reports, it shows that we're following it very well. Here's another view of the resources per channel relative to capacity. And in this case, it includes the shared platform work that benefits all channels. And this, again, this is good information when you have to justify to a business director who's running one of those channels why he isn't getting a bigger chunk of your resources. I don't know if any of you out there have ever had to justify your use or lack of use of resources, but we use data to do that in our organization. So the platform work here is where we share development across the various platforms, and then the different colors represent the individual channels getting unique work. So how well we have a paradox in our organization where we try to leverage as much development as possible, and yet we also have an imperative where we have to provide differentiation for each of the channels. So we, by definition, have a unique development requirement. How well we live in that paradox sets the stage for how efficient we are with our development process. This bottom graph was a communication piece I put together to show that the first development of our new platform project took a large chunk of time, a big piece of the organization. The next time we did that for the next channel, they benefited by only having to use a third of the unique development, and they benefited from the other 2/3 that was done previously. So the efficiency that we gained by using that leverage was tremendous. And then even the third time through the gate, when we did the third channel's unique work, they again benefited heavily from the work done previously. So when you can show this kind of thing to the directors with absolute numbers, it really goes a long way to helping them understand how they're really benefiting from these new channels. So the next, we start to look at how the fruits of our labor translate into revenue. And what I'm showing you in this graph on the top here is the development of the new platform. This is an FTE man-month kind of graph showing how we ramped that team up and what it took to develop that over time. This other color graph here is the current platform, which is actually the current product out in the field, which is still producing a large chunk of revenue. But what you can see is that as the development transitions over time, there is a lag between when you have to do the work and when you start realizing the income from that work. This is important to understand as you plan going forward how your overall portfolio income is going to transfer from one platform to the next. In this particular view, the revenue stream transition is on pace, but you can see that it is analogous to turning a battleship in the ocean. It doesn't happen very quickly. It takes a significant amount of time at that large project level. Now, when you're looking at a smaller project, as I'm looking at in this picture, the lag between doing that work and realizing the revenue is significantly different. It's actually much quicker. And in this particular view, I'm also showing you the difference between developing a project here on the first piece, which was an early feature done on the older platform, and developing that exact same feature on the new platform. The overall work it took to do it was relatively the same. The team was bigger, so we were able to do it in about 1/3 of the time and be a lot more efficient with it. The labor costs were relatively the same, but the result is that the new platform is being received significantly faster and significantly better by virtue of the fact that the unit volumes from that effort are about 3 times what the volumes were from the other effort. This kind of data really leads credence to your business plan and your overall decision-making process by virtue of, you see it in the results. Your results are, the output is significantly higher, and our business is growing as a result of this. Next, and we're getting close to the end here, I'm watching the time, Frank, but next we ask how well we perform to our estimates. When people put together business estimates, they estimate, oh, I'm going to sell 10,000 of these, I'm going to sell 20,000 of these. Well, we actually track that in our business tool, in our portfolio too. And then we look at the actual output from our sales and compare it back to that. So the answer to how well they did that estimate and how well they plan can inform and weight our decisions moving forward on what kind of weight we put on any particular channel or business group's efforts. And it can also inform, how you're going to apply your resources based on that weighting. So we do go back and look at how well we estimated and how well we performed against our estimates. So my closing thought for today, I thank you for your time. I know there's a lot of words and a lot of pictures there, but ultimately to maximize your investment decisions, you need to provide information and analysis back to the management team. And you need to clearly and simply articulate how you're going to accomplish the objectives of your enterprise. I look forward to talking about more portfolio analysis next month at the summit with you, and I look forward and hope to see you there. So Frank, if there's any questions, great, but I know I talked a little bit long. Thanks.
Well, Mark, yeah, actually, regarding the questions, and again, we are time constrained here, but you presented an awful lot of analysis, a lot of data, okay? And one of the things I think that a lot of people are probably thinking in their minds is, in this age of we've got to get all this data gathered up together, I think they used to use the term big data or something like that, in order to get all that information into a useful format for the executives to kind of look at that big picture. You presented lots and lots of different detailed information. Is there a dashboard that kind of condenses all of this down into the key items that you could then expand on as executives and need the information, so they have like a snapshot? This is what's going on in the business. kind of like from the critical aspects of the business, and then all that other data could be pulled in as it's needed. Is there such a thing as a dashboard that would handle that?
There is some tools out there that does put together a dashboard just like that. I will be absolutely honest with you and tell you I'm in process of doing just that, and I haven't completed my personal dashboard, but the Resource First tool does have some dashboard capability as well. That can be set up and customized in this kind of format. So yeah.
Well, I think that would be something that a lot of people would be interested in, and whatever insight during the conference that you can share on all of this data and analysis, and it's all important, and how do we package it in a way that those key decision makers at the top that are making the decisions for the business can kind of take a look at the big picture and then zero in on where the questions are. So that would be a challenge for you, and something to think about as we prepare for the conference in Nashville. Oh, there's a question here before I go to Rick. Let's see what it says here. The resource analysis graphs shown in this presentation, do you provide those graphs using, I can't make that word out, click in Resource First? I think that's it. Michael Fay
Yes.
is asking that question.
I do provide a dashboard to my team in Resource First. All the portfolio analysis is not necessarily in that particular dashboard, just by virtue of the fact that it's used at the upper management level and not necessarily down at the development team level. But most of it, a lot of it, yes, is available through ClickView and through the dashboard, so that the team can kind of see what they're doing as well, especially the resource usage. Yes, that's a good point.
All right.
I'll bring that picture up. Yeah.
So anyway, the questions that are being asked, we'll compile them and use them for reference during the actual conference. So Mark, I'd like to thank you for your time. It sounds like you are one of the, I think that it's rare that we have actual resource planning experts out there, but I think that you certainly fit the bill. I think over in PD, we're somebody we know as Jerry Manis, who is also a resource planning expert. These are excellent people to get in touch with. So hopefully we'll see you all at the conference. And again, Mark, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, now we have one more session, one more speaker, someone that I've known for quite a long time, Rick Morris. We both have our roots in PMI, and then from PMI we started to speak at conferences. That's the Project Management Institute, and then we found ourselves actually following each other around. We'd be pretty much speaking at the same conferences and learning from each other, and it's always exciting to have Rick with us. So Rick, welcome, and I know that you have something kind of special planned for everyone, so let me turn it right over to you.
Absolutely, and thank you, Frank. You're right. At my very first professional speech that I did, you were right next door to me. So for some reason, our careers have kind of continued to follow each other, and I love you for it. You're definitely a brother to us. And so really, we've got about 10 minutes left here, and I want to do a little something different. I'm not going to give away all the stuff that I'm going to be speaking out at the seminar, but I did want to challenge you before you come to the seminar to set a specific intention. To set an intention, not just to come and hear the great sessions, but what are we going to do with that? One of my mentors, John Maxwell, said that experience isn't the greatest teacher. Evaluated experience is the best teacher. And as I was being mentored through a book, Think and Grow Rich, it really kind of hit me. Because if you look at the book, Think and Grow Rich, there's 30 million copies of this book sold. But I don't know 30 million millionaires, and it is absolutely 100% the de facto guide of how to become a millionaire. And so what happens is people either gift the book, you buy the book with the intention to read it, but you never do. Maybe you read a couple of chapters, don't finish. Maybe you actually read the book, but you don't apply the concepts or principles. And so the reason why I bring that up or even talking about that is what is going to be our intention when we get together at this seminar over these 3 days? Is it just to network and have some fun, and hopefully that's part of it? But what is our intention? Like, what are we going to do with the information that we're being presented? Right. So often you'll go to a seminar, take notes, hear some really cool tidbits, maybe learn about a new speaker that you really like, and And then when you get back to the office, what happens is, those notes get filed away, or maybe they get put onto the desk, rarely looked at, and you just kind of get, back into your normal routine. And all of that new learning and new experience tends to go away. And so my challenge to you is to make sure that we have an intention that not only are we coming together, but we're going to come together and really work on some of these issues that are out there. I'm listed as an expert in maximizing organizational capability. That's a lot of words just to say I help companies get better. In almost all the time, I'm clearing the buzzwords and helping them get focused on what it is that they're really trying to solve. What's the problem? So I'll give you a perfect example of some of the things I'll be bringing up. But I'm working with an organization right now, and they moved to an agile model. Why did they move to an agile model? Well, it was a buzzword, and their CEO just thought that means everything was going to be faster. And that's not the case. But when we started to sit down and say, what is it that we're going to do, right? We had to start to get into some metrics. So one of those metrics we talk about all the time is they're looking to increase their sales percentage. And so my first question is, well, how do we know we're done? How do we know we achieve this goal or even move the needle at all, right? It's not just, we want to see a net sales lift. If I get a big client tomorrow and that increases our sales, do we win? Or is it about really operationalizing the efficiency across the board? And so then you start to get into, okay, well, if we want to do a 2.5 net sales lift, what are the three business questions we're trying to answer? And then we can apply technology to that. Is it, do we have a lack of quality leads? Is it that we don't understand what the product mix is, or we don't understand what the buying trends are? What are the business questions we're trying to solve? And once we have those, how do we measure them? So again, instead of, the normal pace of business and IT is that business goes, oh, well, we just need a better database. And then the better database gets thrown over to IT. They knock it out. But it doesn't really answer the business question because we didn't understand the question we were asking in the beginning. And so what we do is work with organizations, and what we're going to bring to you guys here at this seminar is to talk about some of those key executive questions that we walk people through. Things like, are we picking our projects based on what we're spending or what our resources can realistically achieve? That's a huge question that we ask all the time when we're doing our budgets and picking our projects. A lot of people just started 2019 and fiscally as well. And so how do we pick those projects? Was it based on a budget? Or did we really understand what the impact to our resources were and what resources were going to be necessary and needed? Right? I work with a client right now that went agile, but they're basically trimming what they want to do in agile based on the resources that were available versus flipping that and saying, this is a business goal. Who do we really need and how do we really want to utilize them? So our job is to really clear through those buzzwords, really make sure that we have laser focus and that everybody understands the mantra. So I try to get to one or two questions for each role to answer. And based on those one or two questions, we know what their roles and responsibilities and accountabilities are. So our big thing, right, we're going to answer questions, things like, what are your priorities? How are you selecting your priorities? How are you picking your projects? How do you know that people are available? And the biggest one of all, are we doing the right work? Right? That is the issue that seems to plague every organization is everyone's really busy. And in fact, we're overly busy. But are we doing the right things? And when we're done, do we know it? Do we know what that looks like? And so those are some of the concepts that we're going to bring to you guys. What I hope for and what my intention is not to be a person on stage that's talking through this, but to have an interaction with us so that we can start to solve some of the real problems in front of us so that you can take this information right back and start to apply it. That's my intention. I hope you guys have the same. I look so forward to seeing you guys in Nashville. We're going to have a great time, and we're huge fans of PDware and all the people there as much as the product. So, Frank, I'll turn it back over to you, see if there's any other questions.
Well, Rick, you actually covered an awful lot of information in a relatively short period of time. And this is something that I know that you're involved with in connection with everything you've done with PMI. And you brought up something that I think relates to all of this. PMI has had this slogan for a long time that says something like making project management indispensable for business results. And I think that you hit on a couple of things that maybe a lot of project managers are not necessarily thinking about. And when we start talking about program managers and portfolio managers, we might actually start to see that coming up a little bit more. A couple of people that I know, some colleagues, mentioned that every project is a financial investment. And that's a key item. And I'm not so sure that everybody actually sees that. Number two is you can't work on everything. So you have to prioritize. But a lot of people do not do a really good job of prioritizing. As I mentioned earlier, there was the story of the company that maintains the 25 top 10 projects. So you have that. And then you have something that you mentioned also that was also mentioned, I believe, by Mark. And that was the issue of this top-down approach to portfolio management with not a whole lot of bottom-up involvement. So before we close on that, do you have any thoughts on this project as financial investments, prioritization of projects, and maybe a little tip on how do we get the executives at the top to start to connect better with the people that are actually going to do the work?
Absolutely, and that's a lot to digest. So I'll do my best in about a minute and a half, and we can certainly expand when we're together in Nashville. But really, the biggest thing that you've looked at the traditional model of project management was again, based on budget, we say we're going to do these 15 projects. We have no idea whether or not we have the resources to really realistically achieve that. And then each project almost operates on its own, where you come up with your schedule, what people are going to be doing, all that kind of stuff. What we're really doing at the portfolio and program layer is saying, yes, we still have those 20 projects. Even if you're agile, you still have those 20 projects. But what we're doing is starting to look across the landscape to determine what capabilities and what we're going to be delivering within those projects. And then we invest in them at a team layer versus at the project layer. So I'll give you a perfect example. When we were working with an organization and improving their sales, they felt that if they had this certain piece of data, that they would get better sales. So the first step, instead of just kicking off a project to revamp all the marketing stuff, we said, well, let's prove that, right? So we had a very small consolidated project where we manually moved the data through all of our systems and then tracked what the end result was, and we saw a net lift. To me, that proved the theorem, and now we can throw our resources against it. But how many times have we been working on projects that are just, nobody believes in it, it's dead in the water, and, it takes 2 years and $500,000, nobody uses the system. It's because we didn't prove out the value, the business value of what we were trying to drive. And so that's the switch, right, that I'm seeing often in program and portfolio. The other one is we're writing it to a resource constraint model versus a budget constraint model. So again, it's not just what can we do? It's do we have all the people that we can do that with? And they're our limiting factor, not a random date or a random budget that was identified in a budget cycle 8 months ago. Does that answer the question, Frank?
Yeah, it actually helps, and I think that those questions and what you're talking about are going to be food for some additional discussion in Nashville when we all get together. One other thing I can say is that Rick always presents a very lively discussion with a lot of dialogue, and not only is it a presentation, but it's also a discussion, and it kind of goes back and forth where the people in the audience have an opportunity to provide some insight, and Rick has a unique talent to take that insight, analyze it, and come up with different approaches that are useful for everyone. So I'm hoping that those of you that are online with us today will take the time to think about getting down to Nashville. The conference itself is packed with a whole bunch of speakers, and not only is it a knowledge transfer type of a conference, they also incorporate some real honest to goodness fun in the evenings during their special event receptions and things like that. So at this point, I'd like to say thank you to Captain Smith, to Mark, to Rick for taking the time to share some information. The PDU information is now posted right up there on the slide so you can see it. And again, if you have questions, get in touch with Judy at who is really pretty much kind of like the administrator for the Resource Planning Summit, or Jerry Manis at PDWare. And hope to see you in Nashville. It'd be great. Pass the information on to your colleagues. You might find someone that can go there, take some notes, share some information, come back with a wealth of knowledge. So I appreciate all of the speakers' time, and appreciate PDWare for making arrangements for not only the conference, but also to arrange for the speakers for today's webinar. And if you have any questions, my name is Frank Salatis, and you can reach me at my email is my last name Salatis, followed by PMP is Peter Mike Peter at msn.com. That's Salatis PMP at msn.com. And thank you all for being here. And again, hope to see you in Nashville. It's just going to be an exciting event. So take care, everybody. Have a great day. And if you're up in the Northeast, watch out for all that snow that's coming. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, gang. Bye-bye.
Thank you.